Sarah, dressed in her finest, a short black top, a striking red skirt, and her favorite pointy red heels, stumbled through the thick forest. The echoes of the night's party still lingered in her ears as she made her way back to the dormitory. Suddenly, from behind the towering trees, 3 women dressed in black jumped out. Their faces were hidden behind masks, and they moved with eerie precision as they closed in on Sarah. Panic gripped Sarah's heart as they surrounded her. Had she just met with armed robbers in the bushes? Sarah began to beg, her voice trembling. "Take my money. Take anything you want. Just spare my life." The 3 women continued to stare at her with dissatisfied gazes. Suddenly, one of them brought out a small glass bottle of acid and offered it to Sarah. Shocked, she began to plead. "Please, spare me. I can't drink acid. I've never done anything wrong to anyone. I'm a nun, please. I'm not a bad person. Did someone pay you? I can pay you double." Before Sarah could finish her sentence, one of the masked women forced the acid into her mouth, making her drink the burning liquid. Sarah's screams filled the night air as the acid seared her throat, turning her pleas into gurgles of agony. Suddenly, blood began to pour from her mouth. The women froze, shocked by the violent outcome. They had only intended to silence Sarah, to render her mute forever. But now they watched in horror as Sarah bled out before them. "What have you done?" the leader of the masked women stammered. "I asked you to dilute the acid," she shouted at one of the women. "I did dilute it," the woman responded. "No, what have you done?" the leader cried, realizing too late that one of them had not carried out the instructions properly. The women began to panic. They had become murderers. As Sarah writhed in pain, a chilling realization struck her. She recognized their voices. But before she could grasp the truth, her vision blurred, her strength faded, and she collapsed, her life slipping away. What was supposed to be just another night of sneaking out to party had ended with the forest claiming her, the cold earth swallowing her blood. The women, desperate and panicked, dug a shallow grave beneath the towering trees. There, they buried her in the heart of the forest as the night concealed their crime. As they hurried away, they glanced back one last time, their guilt heavy, their fear palpable. And as they vanished into the darkness, they continued to blame one another for the grave mistake they had made. Perhaps their lives would never be the same after that night. The forest remained still, silent yet knowing. The deed was done, but the dead never truly stay buried. The piercing sirens of the ambulance shattered the morning calm at the Royal Secondary School. The ambulance rushed into the boarding school to carry the lifeless body of a female student. Whispers of shock and disbelief rippled through the crowd of students standing outside, their eyes wide with horror. In her office, head teacher Elder Rufus sat in silence, her hands trembling. Shame weighed heavy on her shoulders. Her thoughts raced, not for the lost life, but for the school's reputation. This must be buried, she thought. The world can never know. In her dimly lit bedroom, Clara sobbed uncontrollably, her body trembling with fear. Her mother, Dorothy, sat beside her, trying to soothe her. But Clara's voice shook as she spoke. "I don't want to go back to Royal College, Mom. There's something there, something I can't see, but it's always there." But Dorothy dismissed it as another one of Clara's episodes, a remnant of the recurring hallucinations that plagued her since childhood. Dorothy smiled softly, reassuring her daughter to stay strong and face school again. Later, Dorothy discussed it with her husband Mike. "It's happening again. Clara's episodes." "But we have treated this," Mike replied. "I thought we were done with this issue for good." Probably, Clara doesn't like the idea of going to boarding school, they thought. So she's creating scenes in her head again. They had paid over ₦1,000,000 to enroll her in the most expensive school in the country, and that money couldn't just go to waste. So they both agreed it was nothing. The next morning, they drove Clara back to Royal College as the second term of the school year was resuming, unknowingly sending her into the grip of her unseen terror once more. Clara sat in the back seat trembling, with tears in her eyes, telling her parents she didn't want to continue schooling, but they kept calming her down. Her mother took a stop to divert to her office. It was a long journey to the school. When they got there, her father gave her a hug and told her to be strong before leaving. Clara glanced sadly at the car driving away, feeling abandoned. As she summoned the courage to step into the school once more, she lifted her eyes to behold the elegant building standing before her, the renowned Royal College, a school for the richest of the rich, owned by a group of female nuns who ran the affairs of the school. These women prided themselves on the fact that no student who ever attended their school ever failed. Year after year, they produced students with the highest grades. They even showed students their exam questions before they wrote exams, sometimes to eliminate any chances of failure from their students. Even foreigners attended this school due to its popularity and widespread reputation. Clara settled in her class, and as usual, Danny and Brown were on her case again, disturbing her about her response to their proposal for her to take one of them as her boyfriend. Clara was more of a mute most times, hardly speaking to anyone due to her psychological issues, but because of her exceptional beauty, the boys simply couldn't stay away. Their conversation was interrupted by their class teacher, who came in to take their attendance and give the first lesson. "Thank God," Clara said, giving a sigh of relief as the boys left her alone. By 8 p.m., all the students were gathered in the school's auditorium for the daily night assembly. The head teacher, Elder Rufus, welcomed them to the new term, reminding them of the code of conduct and rules of the dormitory. The students, as usual, settled in their respective dormitories, and things went on as they should. Clara continued to attend classes like a normal student. In her spare time, she read her books and focused on her studies diligently. Clara was a nerd in the sciences. Despite the psychological issues she was diagnosed with, she had an IQ that was extremely high, way beyond her age. She would either be found in the library or alone with her books. Everything was going fine for the first couple of weeks, and Clara began to feel a little sense of calm whenever it was time to sleep in her dormitory. But her newfound sense of ease would not last, as one particular night it started all over again. Clara shut her eyes to sleep, laying on the top bunk, her body rigid with anxiety as sleep eluded her that fateful night. The night was silent. Suddenly, Clara began to sense it again, a terrible presence from the corridor. She began to hear the disturbing sound of high heels screeching against the sharp tiles, cutting through the stillness like a knife. She was the only one who heard it, the only one awake. Her heart pounded as the footsteps drew closer, each step more deliberate, more menacing. Suddenly, it was in her room, the sounds of a woman's footsteps. Clara squeezed her eyes shut, afraid to breathe or move, fearing that any sound she made would bring the thing before her. She clung to her bedsheet, frozen in fear, sweat dripping down her forehead. But then the footsteps stopped. Silence. Was it gone? Clara dared to open her eyes, and her breath caught in her throat. Across from her, a female ghost, drenched in blood, stared back at her from the opposite bed. As Clara stared at the figure, its eyes burned with anger, then softened into a haunting sadness, as if pleading for help. It happened in a split second. Clara screamed, but the room remained undisturbed. No one else woke up. She shut her eyes again, trembling, wishing and praying it was a dream, praying for it to stop. Then, all of a sudden, the thing began to shake her bunk bed so violently, as if trying to throw her off the bed. Clara held on for dear life, barely breathing, until morning came. The room was calm, ordinary, as if nothing had happened. Clara, shaken, recounted her nightmarish experience to her bunkmate, but her words were met with disbelief. No one else had heard or seen anything. Panic twisted inside her. Was it her sickness, her old hallucinations creeping back, or was she truly losing her mind? After class that morning, Clara went back to Danny and Brown and told them of her horrific experiences. They advised her to share these happenings with the head teacher. Clara sat inside the head teacher's office, still traumatized from the horror. Her eyes kept moving around as she was extremely tense. She noticed a separate, mysterious-looking door inside the office. As her mind raced, pondering on what could be behind the door, her thoughts were interrupted by the head teacher's voice. "I heard you wanted to see me. I'm here now. Go on," Elder Rufus said with a mysterious grin on her face. Clara narrated all that she had been experiencing to her. The head teacher showed a sudden fear on hearing all Clara had said. She immediately brought herself to order and acted calmly, trying to hide her shock and fear behind a smile. She told Clara not to worry and to let her know if it happens again. She would take care of the issue. "Hope you haven't told your parents yet?" the head teacher asked. Clara lied and said, "No, I haven't." Then she instructed Clara not to tell anyone, especially her parents, what she was experiencing at night. She assured Clara everything would be put under control. Clara returned back to the two boys, and this time they advised her to make use of the school rosary to pray whenever the spirit came to torment her again. That particular night, the lady in red heels came pacing through the corridor again. Clara shook in fear as her other roommates slept peacefully. In her fright, she waited, knowing the spirit would enter her room, and so it happened. The footsteps, she could hear them from the corridor, and then it was in her room again. At first, the footsteps were slow and subtle, and then suddenly, Clara began to hear the footsteps coming towards her at a faster pace. Trembling, she took a step of faith and lifted up the rosary, praying. Suddenly, the pacing footsteps stopped. A chilling presence stirred in the air. Clara's breath hitched as a faint, pale glow began to illuminate the opposite corner of the dormitory. Slowly, the ghostly figure materialized, her form emerging from the shadows. The woman stood before Clara, staring at her with deep, hollow eyes that seemed to pull Clara into an abyss of sorrow and despair. She was trying to pass a message to her. "What do you want from me?" Clara struggled to mutter. "Your help. I need your help because only you can help me." "Help?" Clara was confused and shaking. "How?" Clara asked the ghost. "You have a gift. You see things that others cannot. Listen, and I will tell you my story." The ghost narrated to Clara who she was. She told her that many years ago, she was once a nun teaching in the school, until one night, as she was returning from her nightly escapades, she was poisoned to death by 3 women. She had returned to avenge her death, but there was a problem. She had no memory of who or why she was killed. All she remembered was what happened on the night she died, and 4 names. She took Clara to the forest behind the school where she was murdered and buried. Ken O'Kara, Travis David, Tafur Olatunji, and a girl's name, Anita Benson. These names have stayed in my memory for so long. I need to find out who killed me and why, before my time is up, and I will no longer be able to appear in this world anymore. "Please," the ghost said to Clara, "will you help me grant a dead woman's last wish?" Clara was moved to tears. Though she was afraid, she felt so much pity and compassion for the ghost, and she agreed to strike a deal with the mysterious ghost, to help her get her revenge before she fades completely away into the other world. "I will return again only when you have the answers," the ghost said before fading into the night. The next day in school, Clara felt a new sense of purpose. She was going to put herself to the test and see how far she could go. And so, with precision, she began to carry out her surreal secret investigation, starting with the 4 names she was given. Clara first began to search the books, going through all the yearbooks of students from previous years in her school. Soon, she stumbled upon their names. It turned out that those students mentioned to her by the ghost lady were all previous students from the same set, the class of 2010, who had graduated from the school many years ago. Clara became upset all of a sudden. That was it. All the information she got on those students, there was nothing more. How could the ghost not give her anything tangible to work with? She brainstormed for days and days, and then, like a light bulb, she had an epiphany on what to do next. She went to the current final year students of the school to ask them questions. Perhaps one of them may remember their seniors and have some information on them. One after the other, she asked different girls, but no one was willing to give her any information. Then, one of them told her she did know of them because they were the popular prefects of their set, the ones who were so intelligent and won all the international competitions for the school. But before their final exams, they suddenly heard that Anita Benson took her own life and committed suicide. She told Clara not to tell anyone because this was a forbidden secret of the school. She then went on to tell Clara that a few weeks following this incident, the 3 guys were suddenly expelled from the school. They were the senator's children, so everyone was shocked, the senior told Clara. "Don't tell anyone I told you this," the girl said as she hurried away to continue what she was doing. Clara returned to her class perplexed. The information she had gotten did not seem to be pointing her in the right direction. The answers seemed out of reach. She was unable to piece the missing puzzles together still. Did the students kill the nun as revenge? Was that why they were expelled? But what about the suicide? As she continued to ponder, she began to think of all the mysterious happenings and things she had either experienced or seen in the school so far. She recalled overhearing the students always gossiping about the head teacher's secret room that no one dared to enter. Clara recalled seeing the mysterious door in her office the previous day. She planned to get into that secret room of the head teacher. She was certain the head teacher must have good information on some of the things that happened in the school from the previous years. But how would she get into the head teacher's office without being caught by Elder Rufus or the CCTV cameras planted everywhere, taping everything happening in the school 24/7? Making use of all the little information she had, Clara came up with a brilliant plan to get the answers she was searching for before the time was up. The next day, while others were in class, Clara sneaked out and walked through the very long hallway, holding a red balloon with a very long string. She was heading to the computer room. She sneaked in, knowing the computer teacher was in class. She was nervous and scared, yet determined to achieve her goal. She sat and focused on the eye of the CCTV covering and recording the computer room. Then, she let go of the balloon string, directing it towards the CCTV. The balloon floated in the air, straight to the face of the camera, and covered it. Immediately, Clara rushed to the computer teacher's laptop. Using her knowledgeable skills in computers, she hacked into the teacher's system and disabled the CCTV covering the computer room, the hallways, the head teacher's office, and all the places she would go through to find answers. She deleted what she had to and hurriedly left the computer room. Now, she had more freedom to do the things that needed to be done. She then went back to her room and waited to carry out her next plan. When it was 8 p.m. that night, all the students, as usual, gathered at the auditorium with all the staff and teaching nuns. Clara sat in the crowd as the head teacher, Elder Rufus, and the nuns addressed them. She waited to sign her attendance. It was 10 minutes to the end of the assembly. Clara quickly rushed out, and going through a different, very long hallway, she made her way to the head teacher's office. Clara got in and was able to unlock the locks of the secret door. When she opened it, she found stacks of videotapes arranged on a shelf, with different years written on them. While Clara was still in the secret room, Elder Rufus was already on her way back to her office from the just concluded assembly meeting. Clara, unaware, took out the tape for 2010, locked the door, and rushed out of the office. It wasn't up to 2 minutes after she left that Elder Rufus got to her office door and entered. Clara began to make her way back, going through the very long hallway leading back to the dormitory. Back in the head teacher's office, Elder Rufus sat comfortably on her chair to let off steam and finish a little paperwork before calling it a day, when suddenly her eyes fell upon a green leaf on the rug right in front of her special door. Her eyes widened in shock and terror. Someone must have gotten into her secret room. Many years back, she had secretly shut in a tiny leaf at the edge of her door that was not very visible for others to see. If anyone else, aside from her, opened the door, the leaf would fall to the ground without the person's knowledge. This had never happened before. Someone had come into her secret room. Elder Rufus immediately swung into action. The culprit couldn't have gotten that far. Using her walkie-talkie, she ordered the security to cut off the power supply to the entire school. Immediately, the lights went off everywhere. Clara, who was still in the hallway, immediately panicked as the lights went off suddenly. She was thrown off balance. They had never experienced a power outage before, and she couldn't see where she was heading to clearly anymore. Quickly, in Elder Rufus's office, she summoned all the nuns and instructed them to go straight into the boys' and girls' dormitories with their torches. They were to scout the toilets in each room to find any empty bed with a missing student. Whoever was not in bed must have been the student who trespassed into her office. The nuns followed the instructions. As they began to search from room to room, Elder Rufus got to Clara's room first, and behold, Clara was missing. Her bed was empty. Elder Rufus knew immediately who had come into her office that night. Meanwhile, Clara was still stuck in the darkness in the hallway, thinking to herself, that she needed to hurry back to her room before the lights came on again. But Clara had no idea what was waiting for her in her room that faithful night. Thank you so much for watching. Please share your thoughts with us by leaving a comment, give a like, share with others, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you in our next story.